Laura Hayes adjusted herself in the plush seat of the Stellar Horizons first-class cabin, trying to get comfortable. She had always preferred economy during her travels. It felt more authentic, less pretentious. But this trip was different. For once, she wasn't flying the ship. She was just another passenger on board, heading toward Proxima Centauri for what she hoped would be a much-needed break. She glanced at the coffee cup in her hand, its warmth soothing against the chill of deep space. Outside the massive window beside her, stars stretched endlessly across the void like tiny pinpricks of light. It was beautiful, but Laura couldn't fully appreciate it today. Her mind kept drifting back to the article she'd been reading earlier, on her tablet, another exposé about TerraCorp's unethical practices. The company had become infamous for exploiting alien ecosystems, mining planets dry, and displacing native species without a second thought. Across the aisle, Daniel Leavitt sat comfortably in his seat, scrolling through something on his own device. He looked every bit the corporate executive, well-groomed, sharply dressed, and radiating confidence. Laura recognized him instantly from countless news reports. His name was practically synonymous with greed and exploitation. Even now, he wore an expression that screamed entitlement, as if the entire universe owed him something. Her grip tightened slightly on her coffee cup when she overheard him speaking to the man seated next to him. "You see," Daniel said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "sometimes you have to make tough choices. Progress doesn't come without sacrifice." His voice carried just enough to reach Laura's ears, each word grating on her nerves. Progress? Sacrifice? Laura rolled her eyes. Those were buzzwords often used by people like Daniel to justify their actions. To them, progress meant lining their pockets, no matter who or what they destroyed along the way. And sacrifice? That was code for ignoring the needs of others so long as profits soared. For a moment, she considered letting it go. After all, why bother engaging someone like him? People like Daniel didn't change their minds because of arguments or logic. But then again, maybe staying silent made her complicit. If everyone stayed quiet, nothing would ever improve. Taking a deep breath, Laura set her coffee down and turned toward him. "Excuse me," she said firmly, catching both Daniel and the man beside him off guard. "Did I hear you correctly? Are you really saying that destroying ecosystems and displacing species is acceptable because it benefits humanity?" Daniel blinked, surprised by the interruption. Then slowly a smirk spread across his face. "And you are?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Laura Hayes," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm a pilot, and, unlike some people, I care about the impact we have on the places we visit." The man beside Daniel raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by the exchange. Others in the cabin began to take notice too, turning their heads to watch the unfolding drama. First-class cabins weren't exactly known for excitement, so any kind of conflict was bound to draw attention. "Well, Ms. Hayes," Daniel said, leaning back in his seat with exaggerated casualness, "it's easy to talk about caring when you're not responsible for feeding billions of mouths or ensuring humanity's survival. Someone has to make the hard decisions, and unfortunately, idealists like you tend to get in the way." "Idealists?" Laura repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Is that what you call people who believe in doing the right thing? Because last I checked, exploiting resources until there's nothing left isn't sustainable. It's reckless." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head as though amused by her naivety. "Sustainability is a luxury, my dear. When push comes to shove, survival trumps ethics every time. History proves it." "That's where you're wrong," Laura shot back, leaning forward in her seat. "History also shows us what happens when we prioritize short-term gains over long-term consequences. Look at Earth. We've already wrecked one planet. Do we really need to repeat those mistakes elsewhere?" By now, nearly everyone in the cabin was listening intently. Some nodded in agreement with Laura, while others seemed to side with Daniel. A few simply watched, fascinated by the verbal sparring match. Ethan Carter, a quiet man seated a few rows away, observed silently. Unlike the rest of the passengers, he didn't appear particularly invested in the debate. Instead, he studied Laura and Daniel with keen interest, occasionally jotting notes onto a small pad. No one paid him much attention. He blended into the background, unassuming and nondescript. As the argument continued, the tension in the air grew palpable. Daniel's smirk never faltered, but there was a flicker of irritation in his eyes. He clearly wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like Laura. Meanwhile, Laura felt her frustration mounting. How could anyone justify such blatant disregard for life? Just as things were reaching a boiling point, the ship's AI assistant chimed in over the intercom. "Attention passengers, we are approaching a nebula. Please prepare for mild turbulence as we navigate through the area." Most passengers barely acknowledged the announcement, too engrossed in the heated exchange between Laura and Daniel. But Laura noticed something odd. The turbulence mentioned by the AI hadn't started yet. In fact, everything seemed eerily calm. She glanced out the window again, her unease growing. Something about the situation felt off. Still, she pushed, the thought aside for now, focusing instead on the task at hand, making sure Daniel understood the gravity of his actions and the harm they caused. "You know," Laura said, lowering her voice but keeping it firm, "if more people thought like you, humanity wouldn't stand a chance out here. We'd consume everything until there's nothing left, and then what? Where do we go after that?" Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, the ship lurched violently. Coffee cups tipped over, tablets slid off tray tables, and startled cries filled the cabin. Whatever was happening, it wasn't ordinary turbulence. For a brief moment, all eyes turned away from Laura and Daniel, focusing instead on the chaos erupting around them. But even as panic set in, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them could have anticipated. The turbulence hit hard, jolting the stellar horizon like a wild animal trying to break free from its cage. Passengers scrambled to secure themselves as the ship rocked violently from side to side. Laura gripped her armrests so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her tablet slid off the tray table and floated into the air, joining other loose items now hovering weightlessly around the cabin. "Everyone, please remain calm," came the voice of the ship's captain over the intercom, though it did little to ease the growing panic. "We are experiencing technical difficulties, but our crew is working to stabilize the situation." Daniel Leavitt looked anything but calm. His earlier smugness had vanished, replaced by wide-eyed fear. He fumbled with his seatbelt, muttering under his breath about how this wasn't supposed to happen on such a high-end vessel. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, glaring at no one in particular. "What kind of operation lets something like this occur?" Laura ignored him, focusing instead on the view outside the window. The once clear expanse of stars was now obscured by swirling clouds of gas and dust, the nebula they were passing through. But there was something strange about it. The colors seemed too vivid, almost unnatural, pulsating faintly as if alive. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just turbulence. Something else was going on. Ethan Carter remained eerily composed despite the chaos. While others clung to their seats or shouted in alarm, he sat quietly, observing everything with sharp eyes. Occasionally, he glanced down at the notepad in his lap, jotting quick notes even as the ship shuddered again. When the initial shock began to subside, Laura managed to speak up. "Does anyone else think this feels wrong?" she asked aloud, addressing no one specifically but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "This isn't normal turbulence." A few heads nodded in agreement, but most people were still too shaken to respond. One elderly woman across the aisle whimpered softly, clutching a pendant around her neck. A younger man beside her tried to comfort her, saying, "It'll be okay. These ships are built to handle anything." But Laura wasn't convinced. As a pilot, she knew better than to dismiss gut instincts. Something about the way the ship moved and the eerie glow of the nebula felt off. It reminded her of stories she'd heard about uncharted regions of space, where physics didn't behave quite right. Could they have wandered into one of those areas? As if reading her thoughts, Ethan spoke up for the first time. His voice was calm and measured, cutting through the murmurs of panic. "You're right," he said, nodding toward Laura. This isn't ordinary turbulence. Look at the readings. He pointed to a nearby holographic display showing data about their trajectory. The numbers were fluctuating wildly, far beyond what should have been possible. Daniel scoffed, regaining some of his composure, now that the worst of the shaking had subsided. "Oh, great. Another conspiracy theorist?" he muttered sarcastically. "Let me guess, you think aliens are behind this too?" To everyone's surprise, Ethan didn't deny it. Instead, he gave Daniel a level stare. "Actually, yes. There are theories about intelligent extraterrestrial life using gravitational anomalies to communicate, or defend their territory. We might have stumbled into something we weren't meant to see." The room fell silent. Even Daniel seemed taken, aback by Ethan's matter-of-fact tone. Laura leaned forward, intrigued. "Do you really believe that? That we've encountered aliens?" "I didn't say I believed it," Ethan replied cryptically. "I just said it's a possibility, and given the circumstances, it's worth considering." Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched again, harder this time. Screams erupted throughout the cabin as passengers struggled to stay seated. This time, however, the turbulence was accompanied by a strange sound, a low hum that seemed to resonate deep within their chests. It wasn't mechanical. It felt organic, almost alive. Laura glanced out the window again and froze. Beyond the swirling colors of the nebula, shapes began to emerge. At first they were indistinct, like shadows moving in the distance. But as the moments passed, they became clearer, massive forms gliding gracefully through the void. They weren't ships. Exactly. They looked more like living creatures, enormous and luminous, their surfaces shimmering with intricate patterns of light. "Did anyone else see that?" Laura whispered, pointing toward the window. Several passengers followed her gaze, gasping, in awe as the shapes came fully into view. Daniel, however, refused to look. "This is absurd," he snapped, crossing his arms defiantly. "There's a perfectly logical explanation for all of this. Probably some magnetic interference messing with the sensors." Even as he spoke, the ship's systems began to fail. Lights flickered, holographic displays went dark, and the hum grew louder, reverberating through the hull. The artificial gravity faltered, causing everyone to float slightly before stabilizing again. Panic spread quickly among the passengers, many of whom began praying or crying. Laura unbuckled her seatbelt and pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the protests of those around her. "We need to find out what's happening," she said firmly. "If these really are aliens, maybe we can establish contact." "You're insane," Daniel retorted, grabbing her wrist as she started toward the aisle. "You're going to get us all killed." She wrenched her arm free, meeting his glare with equal intensity. "And doing nothing will save us? Sitting here waiting for the ship to fall apart isn't exactly a plan." With that, she made her way toward the cockpit, weaving carefully between floating debris and frightened passengers. Ethan watched her go, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he stood up as well, following silently behind her. When they reached the cockpit door, Laura hesitated. It was locked, sealed shut to prevent unauthorized access during emergencies. She pressed the intercom button beside it. "Captain, this is Laura Hayes. I'm a pilot. I might be able to help." For a moment, there was no response. Then the captain's voice crackled through the speaker. "Ms. Hayes, what do you know about gravitational anomalies?" "Enough to understand that we're dealing with something extraordinary here," she replied. "Please, let me in." After a brief pause, the door slid open, revealing the harried faces of the flight crew inside. The captain, a tall man with graying hair, gestured for her to enter. Ethan slipped in behind her without waiting for permission. "What's our status?" Laura asked immediately, scanning the control panels. Most of the instruments were malfunctioning, displaying erratic data that made little sense. "We're caught in some kind of gravitational pull," the co-pilot explained, his hands flying over the controls. "It's dragging us deeper into the nebula. We've lost communication with HQ and our engines are barely functioning." Laura frowned, studying the readouts. "Can we reverse thrust? Try to break free?" "We've already tried," the captain said grimly. "Whatever's pulling us is stronger than anything we've ever encountered." As they spoke, the hum grew louder still, filling the cockpit with an almost unbearable intensity. Outside, the windshield. The glowing shapes drew closer, surrounding the ship like curious predators. Their lights pulsed rhythmically as if communicating in some alien language. Ethan stepped forward, his demeanor suddenly commanding. "They're trying to make contact," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "If we don't respond soon, they may assume we're hostile." "How do you know that?" Laura demanded, turning to face him. Instead of answering, Ethan pulled out his notepad and began sketching something, a series of symbols that looked vaguely familiar yet completely foreign. When he finished, he handed it to Laura. "Transmit this," he instructed. "It's a basic greeting in universal mathematical terms. If they're intelligent, they'll recognize it." The crew exchanged skeptical glances, but Laura trusted her instincts. "Do it," she told the captain. "It's our best shot." Nodding reluctantly, the captain input the sequence into the ship's transmitter. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the hum began to change. It softened, becoming melodic rather than oppressive. The glowing shapes outside shifted position, forming a protective circle around the stellar horizon. "They're responding," Ethan murmured, a hint of relief in his voice. "Now we wait." As the ship stabilized and the immediate danger subsided, Laura allowed herself a small sigh of relief. But she knew this was only the beginning. Whatever these beings wanted, humanity was about to learn whether it deserved a place among the stars, or if its reckless expansion would finally catch up with it. The hum continued to fill the cockpit, softer now but still unmistakable. It was almost soothing, like a distant melody playing just beyond human comprehension. Laura couldn't help but stare out the windshield at the glowing shapes surrounding the stellar horizon. They were closer than ever, their luminous forms pulsating rhythmically, as if responding to some unseen signal. "They're watching us," Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence. He stood beside Laura, his eyes fixed on the massive forms outside. "They're waiting to see what we'll do next." Laura glanced at him, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Who are you exactly? You seem to know a lot about this." Ethan hesitated before answering. "Let's just say I've studied these kinds of phenomena before, and I've seen enough evidence to believe that intelligent extraterrestrial life exists, and that they've been observing humanity for a long time." Before Laura could press further, the captain interrupted. "Whatever they want, we need to figure it out fast. Our systems are barely holding together, and we're running low on power." The co-pilot nodded grimly, tapping furiously at his console. "Life support is stable, for now, but if we lose another system, we might not recover." Laura turned back to the controls, scanning the readouts. Despite the chaos, her training kicked in, allowing her to focus. She pointed to one of the screens. "Look, there's a pattern here. These fluctuations aren't random, they're repeating every few seconds. Could it be some kind of communication?" Ethan leaned in, studying the data. "It's possible. Aliens often use mathematical patterns or frequencies to convey meaning. If we can decode it, we might be able to understand them." Daniel burst into the cockpit then, his face flushed with anger. "What is going on here? Why are you all acting like this is some science fiction movie? We need to get out of here, not sit around deciphering signals." Laura crossed her arms, meeting his glare head-on. "And how do you suggest we do that, Daniel? Our engines are failing and something out there has us trapped. Unless you have a better idea, maybe you should let the experts handle this." Daniel opened his mouth to argue but stopped when Ethan stepped forward. "She's right," Ethan said calmly. "If we act aggressively or try to escape without understanding their intentions, we risk escalating the situation. For all we know, these beings could destroy us in an instant if they perceive us as a threat." That shut Daniel up, though he didn't look happy about it. He slumped against the wall, muttering under his breath about incompetence and wasted opportunities. Meanwhile, Laura and Ethan worked together to analyze the incoming signal. Using Ethan's sketches as a reference, they identified a sequence. of pulses that matched the pattern displayed on the ship's monitors. This part repeats 3 times, Laura said, pointing to a section of the waveform. It could represent a greeting, or maybe a question. Or a warning, Ethan added cautiously. We won't know until we respond. The captain nodded. Do it. Send the same sequence back and see what happens. With trembling hands, the co-pilot entered the sequence into the transmitter. Everyone held their breath as the message went out. For several agonizing moments, nothing changed. Then slowly the hum grew louder again, followed by a new series of pulses. This time the patterns were more complex, almost musical. They're responding, Ethan exclaimed, excitement creeping into his voice. They've acknowledged us. Laura felt a surge of hope. So what do we do now? How do we talk to them? We start simple, Ethan replied. Mathematics is universal. We can use numbers and basic equations to build a foundation for communication. Once we establish trust, we can move on to more complex ideas. As Ethan began sketching additional sequences, Laura noticed something odd about the alien shapes outside. One of them had moved closer to the ship, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Within moments, a beam of light shot out, illuminating a section of the hull. What's happening? The captain asked sharply. It's scanning us, Ethan explained. They're probably analyzing our technology, or maybe even our biology. This is standard procedure for first contact scenarios. But will they hurt us? Laura asked, unable to hide the worry in her voice. I don't think so, Ethan said. Their behavior suggests curiosity, not hostility. Still, we should proceed carefully. While the crew monitored the scan, Daniel paced anxiously behind them. This is insane, he muttered. Aliens? Really? Next thing you'll tell me is that they want to trade recipes for intergalactic cuisine. Laura rolled her eyes, but chose to ignore him. There were more important things to focus on right now. As the scan continued, the hum shifted again, becoming softer and more melodic. Suddenly, the ship's main display lit up with a series of symbols unlike anything any of them had ever seen. These must be their language, Laura said, staring at the screen in awe. Can we translate them? Ethan studied the symbols intently. Not directly, but we can try to find correlations between their patterns and ours. It'll take time, though. Time was something they weren't sure they had. The ship's systems were still deteriorating, and the temperature in the cabin was dropping steadily. Passengers in the main cabin huddled together for warmth, their fear palpable. Back in the cockpit, Laura suggested broadcasting Earth's history as a way to introduce humanity. If we show them who we are, the good and the bad, they might understand where we're coming from. Ethan nodded. It's worth a shot, but keep it honest. If they detect deception, it could ruin everything. Working quickly, the crew compiled a visual record of Earth's achievements and struggles. Images of cities, nature, art, war, and space exploration. When the transmission was ready, they sent it out, hoping it would convey the complexity of human civilization. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the aliens responded, not with words, but with visuals of their own. On the screen appeared breathtaking scenes of their world, towering crystalline structures, oceans filled with bioluminescent creatures, and skies painted with colors humans had never imagined. It was beautiful, almost dreamlike. They're sharing their home with us, Ethan whispered, visibly moved. This is unprecedented. Laura felt tears welling up in her eyes. They're incredible, she murmured. We've been so focused on ourselves we never stopped to think about what else might be out there, but not everyone shared her sentiment. Daniel scoffed loudly. Great, so now we're swapping postcards with aliens. What's next? A peace treaty? Actually, Ethan said, turning to face him, that's exactly what this could lead to. If we play our cards right, this could change everything, for both humanity and these beings. Before Daniel could respond, the ship shuddered violently once more. Alarms blared as the lights flickered again. Outside, the alien shapes began, moving rapidly, forming a tight formation around the stellar horizon. They're doing something to the ship, the captain said urgently. Brace yourselves! Everyone grabbed onto whatever they could as the vessel lurched forward. Instead of pulling them deeper into the nebula, however, the movement seemed directed. The ship was being guided, gently but firmly, toward an unknown destination. "Are they taking us somewhere?" Laura asked, gripping the edge of the console. "It looks that way," Ethan replied. "Maybe their homeworld or a neutral location where we can continue communicating safely." The captain clenched his jaw. "Whether we like it or not, we're along for the ride. Let's just hope they're friendly." As the stellar horizon sailed through the nebula surrounded by the glowing forms of their mysterious escorts, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into uncharted territory, not just physically, but morally and spiritually. Humanity had always dreamed of meeting intelligent life beyond Earth. Now that the moment had arrived, she realized just how much was at stake. For better or worse, the future of humanity's place among the stars rested on the decisions made in the hours to come. The stellar horizon came to a gentle stop inside what could only be described as an alien docking bay. The massive chamber stretched endlessly in every direction, its walls glowing softly with pulsating light. It was unlike anything Laura had ever seen, alive, almost organic, shifting colors in rhythmic waves. She felt small standing there, dwarfed not just by the size of the structure, but by the sheer alienness of it all. Moments after landing, a group of aliens entered the chamber. They were tall and slender, their bodies shimmering with intricate patterns of light that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Their faces, or what passed for faces, were smooth and featureless, except for faint glowing markings that pulsed, gently, as if synchronized with the hum filling the air. Laura's heart raced as she took them in. These weren't the bug-eyed monsters or robotic invaders depicted in sci-fi movies. They were elegant, serene, and undeniably intelligent. Despite their strangeness, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. "Are you seeing this?" Daniel whispered beside her, his usual arrogance replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. This can't be real." "It's real," Ethan said quietly, stepping forward. His voice carried a mix of reverence and caution. "And we need to approach this carefully. Every move we make matters." The captain and crew remained aboard the stellar horizon, too overwhelmed to leave the relative safety of the ship. But Laura, Daniel, and Ethan had been transported onto the alien vessel somehow, likely through some advanced teleportation technology. Now they stood alone before the towering beings, unsure of what to expect next. One of the aliens stepped forward, its glowing markings intensifying as it did so. Without speaking, it projected a series of symbols into the air between them. The holograms floated gently, rotating slowly as if inviting inspection. "They're trying to communicate." "Again," Ethan said, studying the symbols closely. "It's similar to the patterns we saw earlier, but more complex. This might be a test or maybe an introduction." Laura nodded, stepping closer to the holograms. "We should respond, show them we're willing to learn." Ethan quickly sketched a sequence on his notepad and held it up for the aliens to see. The lead alien tilted its head slightly, as if considering the gesture. Then, one of the floating symbols shifted, mirroring Ethan's drawing almost perfectly. "They understood," Ethan breathed, his voice tinged with excitement. "They're adapting to our level of communication." Encouraged, Laura pointed to herself and said her name clearly. "Laura." When the alien didn't react immediately, she repeated the gesture, tapping her chest. To her surprise, the alien mimicked her motion, though no sound came from it. Instead, another hologram appeared, displaying a series of glowing lines that seemed to represent her name. "They're assigning us identifiers," Ethan explained. "It's how they categorize things, or people." Daniel crossed his arms, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Great, so now we're lab rats. What's stopping them from dissecting us or turning us into some kind of experiment?" "They haven't harmed us yet," Laura countered. "If they wanted to hurt us, they've had plenty of chances." Before Daniel could argue further, the lead alien extended a limb-like appendage toward them. At its tip, a glowing orb formed, projecting new images into the air. These weren't abstract symbols this time. They were scenes of planets, stars, and spacecraft. Some showed lush ecosystems, teeming with life, while others depicted barren wastelands scarred by destruction. "What are they showing us?" Daniel asked, frowning. "I think it's a message," Ethan replied. "Look, the thriving worlds seem untouched, while the damaged ones show signs of exploitation, mining rigs, pollution, deforestation." Laura's stomach sank as she realized what the aliens were trying to convey. "They know about TerraCorp," she murmured, "about what humanity has done to other planets." Daniel stiffened, his face reddening. "This isn't fair. They don't understand our side of things. We needed those resources to survive." "And look where it got us," Laura shot back. "On the brink of collapse, destroying everything in our path. Maybe they're trying to warn us or teach us a better way." The aliens paused their projection, seemingly waiting for a response. Laura took a deep breath and stepped forward, pointing to the damaged worlds and shaking her head. Then she gestured to the thriving ecosystems and nodded firmly, mimicking approval. The lead alien's markings brightened, and it emitted a low, melodic tone that resonated throughout the chamber. Another hologram appeared, a depiction of Earth, surrounded by a protective barrier of light. "They're offering to help," Ethan said, his voice filled with wonder. "But only if we prove we're capable of change." Daniel scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Change? You mean give up progress? Sacrifice everything we've worked for?" "No," Laura said sharply. "I mean finding a balance, learning to coexist instead of conquer. Isn't that worth striving for?" For once, Daniel didn't have a quick retort. He looked away, his jaw clenched tightly. As the conversation continued, the aliens introduced another set of projections, images, of their own civilization. Towering crystalline cities blended seamlessly with natural landscapes, powered by energy sources that seemed to harmonize with their environment, rather than deplete it. Schools of bioluminescent creatures swam through skies filled with floating islands, and fields of glowing plants stretched as far as the holograms allowed. "They've achieved something incredible," Ethan said softly. "A society built on sustainability and cooperation. No wonder they're concerned about us." Laura nodded, feeling a mixture of admiration and shame. Humanity had so much to learn and so much to lose if they failed to adapt. Suddenly, the lead alien turned its attention directly to Daniel. Its markings dimmed slightly, and it projected a single image, a corporate logo unmistakably belonging to TerraCorp. Daniel froze, his face pale. "They know who I am," he whispered, his voice trembling. "How do they know?" Ethan glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "Maybe they've been watching us longer than we thought. Or maybe someone told them." Laura frowned, turning to Ethan. "What do you mean, someone? Are you suggesting—" Before she could finish, the alien interrupted by creating a final hologram, a map of the galaxy, with several locations marked by pulsating lights. One of the markers was near Proxima Centauri, their original destination. "They're giving us coordinates," Ethan said. "Safe routes for future exploration, places where we won't cause harm." "But there's a catch," Laura added, noticing a symbol flashing near the map's edge. "That marker, it's red." "What does it mean?" Ethan studied it for a moment before answering. "A warning. If we stray into that area, we risk encountering hostility or worse." The weight of the alien's message settled over them. Humanity wasn't being rejected outright, but it was being given a choice. Adapt and thrive responsibly, or face the consequences of unchecked greed. As the meeting drew to a close, the aliens escorted them back to the stellar horizon. Once aboard, the ship lifted off smoothly, guided out of the mothership by the same gravitational forces that had brought them here. Back in the cockpit, Laura stared out the window at the retreating alien vessel, her mind racing. She knew this encounter would change everything, for better or worse. But as the ship re-entered normal space, one thing was clear: humanity's future depended not on domination, but on understanding. Back on the stellar horizon, tensions among the passengers reached a boiling point. The encounter with the aliens had left everyone shaken and divided. Some saw it as a wake-up call, a chance to rethink humanity's approach to space exploration. Others, like Daniel Levitt, viewed it as an obstacle to progress, a threat to their way of life. Laura called an impromptu meeting in the ship's conference room, hoping to unite the passengers around a shared vision for the future. "We've been given an incredible opportunity," she began, standing at the head of the table. "The aliens didn't reject us outright. They offered us a path forward, but only if we're willing to change." Daniel snorted, leaning back in his chair. "Change? You mean roll over and let them dictate our actions? This isn't about coexistence, it's about control. They're testing us, seeing how far they can push before we fight back." "That's not true," Laura countered, her voice firm but calm. "They showed us their world, a civilization built on balance and respect for nature. Isn't that something worth striving for?" "Balance," Daniel snapped, slamming his hand on the "Jefferson, you think TerraCorp got where it is today by playing nice? Progress comes at a price. And if you're too afraid to pay it, then maybe you shouldn't be part of this conversation." The room erupted into murmurs as other passengers weighed in. One woman, a scientist named Rachel, spoke up in support of Laura. "She's right. We've seen what happens when we prioritize profit over sustainability. Earth is proof of that. If we don't learn from our mistakes, we'll destroy every planet we touch." Another passenger, a businessman named Carter, sided with Daniel. "And what's your alternative? Go back to living in caves? Sacrifice billions of lives because a bunch of glowing aliens told us to slow down?" Ethan, who had remained silent until now, finally interjected. "It's not about going backward," he said, his tone measured but commanding. "It's about finding a better way forward. The aliens didn't just show us their success, they warned us about the dangers of repeating our past. Ignoring that warning would be reckless." Daniel turned on him, his face red with anger. "Oh, here we go again. Mr. Conspiracy Theorist thinks he knows best. Tell me, Ethan, how exactly do you plan to save humanity while keeping everyone happy?" "I'm not trying to keep everyone happy," Ethan replied coolly. "I'm trying to keep everyone alive. There's a difference." The argument raged on, growing louder and more heated. Passengers shouted over one another, tempers flaring as old prejudices and fears bubbled to the surface. Laura watched helplessly, realizing that the real challenge wasn't convincing the aliens, it was convincing her own species. Finally, she raised her hands, calling for silence. "Enough!" Her voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Fighting amongst ourselves won't solve anything. Whether we like it or not, the aliens hold all the cards. If we want to survive out here, we need to prove we're capable of change." Daniel crossed his arms, glaring at her. "Fine. Let's say we play along with their rules. What happens when someone breaks them? What happens when humanity's hunger for resources overrides whatever promises we make today?" "That's why we need safeguards," Laura said. "Clear guidelines enforced by both sides. Maybe even joint ventures between humans and aliens to ensure cooperation." Ethan nodded in agreement. "It's possible. The aliens are clearly advanced enough to monitor our activities. If we establish trust, they might share technology or resources to help us transition." But Daniel wasn't convinced. "Trust? With creatures we barely understand? You're dreaming if you think this ends well." Despite his skepticism, the tide seemed to be turning. More passengers were beginning to see the logic in Laura's arguments. Even some of Daniel's allies started to waver, questioning whether unchecked expansion was truly sustainable or wise. As the meeting drew to a close, Laura made one final appeal. "This isn't just about us. It's about future generations, the ones who will inherit the stars. Do we want to leave them a legacy of destruction or a chance to thrive?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, people began to nod. Not everyone agreed completely, but a fragile consensus emerged. They would follow the aliens' guidance, for now. Daniel stormed out of the room, muttering under his breath about betrayal and naivety. But Laura didn't chase after him. She knew there was no reasoning with someone so entrenched in their beliefs. Instead, she turned to Ethan. Do you really think we can pull this off? He smiled faintly, though his eyes remained serious. I think we have to. Failure isn't an option, not if we want humanity to have a future. With the decision made, the crew set course for Proxima Centauri, following the coordinates provided by the aliens. Along the way, they worked tirelessly to draft proposals for sustainable colonization practices, incorporating lessons learned from the encounter. Holographic displays filled the conference room as passengers collaborated on designs for eco-friendly habitats, renewable energy systems, and resource-sharing agreements. Yet, despite the progress, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The aliens had given them a roadmap, but they hadn't explained everything. Why had they singled out Daniel during the meeting? And what did the red marker on the galactic map signify? Her questions lingered unanswered as the stellar horizon approached its destination. Outside the windows, the distant glow of Proxima Centauri grew brighter, promising new opportunities and new challenges. Little did Laura know, the aliens weren't finished with them yet. Their journey was far from over. As the stellar horizon approached Proxima Centauri, the passengers braced themselves for what lay ahead. The coordinates provided by the aliens led them to a lush, uncharted planet orbiting the star, a world teeming with vibrant ecosystems and untapped resources. It was everything humanity had dreamed of finding, a new home, rich with possibilities. But something felt off. Laura stood near the viewport, her eyes fixed on the glowing alien ships that now shadowed the stellar horizon. They hadn't left after the initial encounter. Instead, they followed at a distance, their presence both protective and unsettling. "They're watching us," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Testing us." Ethan joined her, his expression unreadable. "It makes sense. They gave us this chance, but they won't let us fail, not without consequences." Daniel, overhearing their conversation, scoffed loudly. "Fail? We haven't even started yet. Stop acting like they're gods or something. This is just another resource-rich planet waiting to be claimed." Laura spun around, her patience wearing thin. "Claimed? That's exactly the attitude they warned us about. If we go down there thinking we own it, we'll destroy it, and ourselves in the process." "You think I don't know that?" Daniel snapped, stepping closer. "I've spent my entire career balancing profit and preservation, but you idealists always act like there's some magical solution where everyone wins. Newsflash, life doesn't work that way." Before Laura could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The crew scrambled to assess the situation as the alien ships moved closer, surrounding the stellar horizon once again. A low hum filled the cabin, growing louder, until it vibrated through the hull. "They're communicating," Ethan said, studying the holographic displays that flickered to life. Alien symbols appeared, pulsating urgently. "This isn't a friendly check-in, something's wrong." The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Everyone, brace yourselves. We're being pulled into orbit around the planet. Engines are offline. We can't resist." Panic spread among the passengers as the ship descended rapidly. Outside the viewport, the alien ships formed a tight formation, their lights flashing in unison. It was clear they were in control. When the stellar horizon stabilized in orbit, the hum ceased, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Moments later, a transmission appeared on the main display. Not symbols this time, but a direct message, translated into broken but understandable English. "Humanity, prove worth, or leave." The words sent a chill through the room. Laura clenched her fists, her mind racing. "Prove worth? What does that mean?" Ethan frowned, flipping through his notes. "Maybe they want us to demonstrate our intentions, show them we're serious about coexistence." "How do we do that?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. "We're just passengers. We don't have the tools or expertise to negotiate with aliens." "We adapt," Laura said firmly. "We show them we're willing to learn. Maybe they'll guide us if we take the first step." Daniel rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go again. Let's all hold hands and sing songs while the galaxy falls apart around us. Real effective strategy." Ignoring him, Laura turned to the group. "We need to send a gesture, something meaningful." Ideas? After a brief discussion, they decided to transmit images of Earth's efforts toward sustainability. Wind farms, reforestation projects, and clean energy initiatives. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. An acknowledgement of humanity's flaws and aspirations. As the message went out, the alien ships remained motionless, their lights dimmed. Minutes passed in tense silence. Just when hope began to fade, one of the ships detached from the formation and approached the stellar horizon. A beam of light enveloped the ship, and suddenly, Laura, Daniel, and Ethan found themselves transported onto the alien vessel once more. This time the chamber was different. Instead of the serene, organic environment they'd seen before, the walls were stark and metallic, lined with screens displaying data streams. The lead alien stood before them, its markings pulsing rapidly, a sign of urgency. "They're upset," Ethan whispered. "Something's changed." The alien projected a series of holograms, images of TerraCorp mining operations destroying alien habitats, accompanied by the red marker from the galactic map. Then, shockingly, it showed footage of Ethan meeting with corporate executives months earlier. "They know," Ethan said quietly, his face pale. "They know I manipulated events to bring Daniel here, to expose him." "What?" Daniel shouted, turning on Ethan. "You planned this? You used me as bait?" "I did what I had to do," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the accusation. "TerraCorp's greed has caused too much damage. Someone needed to make them see the truth." Laura stared at Ethan, stunned. "So this whole trip, it wasn't random, you orchestrated it?" "Yes," he admitted, "but only because I believed humanity deserved a second chance. And so do you, Laura." Before anyone could react further, the lead alien emitted a sharp tone, silencing the group. Another hologram appeared, a timeline showing humanity's potential futures. One path led to prosperity and harmony, the other ended in devastation and extinction. "They're giving us a choice," Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Change, or face the consequences." Daniel looked shaken, his usual bravado gone. For the first time, he seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. "What happens now?" The alien gestured toward the exit. As the three humans returned to the stellar horizon, the alien ships withdrew, leaving them alone in orbit. The message was clear. Humanity had been given provisional status. Their actions moving forward would determine their fate. Back aboard the ship, Laura addressed the passengers one last time. "We've been given a chance to rewrite our story. Whether we succeed depends on each of us. Let's not waste it." As the stellar horizon prepared to land on the new planet, Ethan disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a note. "Every species deserves a chance to evolve. Make yours count." And with that, humanity took its first tentative steps toward a brighter future or its final descent into chaos.